We are live on LinkedIn. Welcome back for another of our fantastic episodes of How Do You Solve a Problem with Maria and Gareth. Maria, how are you doing today? How's everything?
Everything is good. How is life over there?
Fantastic. Absolutely great. And we were talking before we started this LinkedIn Live today. And if you're joining us on LinkedIn, of course, welcome. If you're listening to this sometime in the future, welcome as well. You can put comments in the live LinkedIn chat at the moment. The comments, we'll see those. We can address them. But we were talking just before we came live about how we deal with nerves giving presentations, right, Maria? How do you deal with nerves when you have to give a presentation?
Coffee. So my main issue is not with dealing with nerves when giving a presentation, is just to make myself not repeat myself. So it's one of the things, and I don't know, I need to change my brain into English, which is a thing that happens.
That's a really important point, and we're going to come back to that in a moment because, of course, even though you may not know it, Maria, of course, is not a native English speaker. Where are you from, Maria?
I'm from Portugal, one of the Romance languages that's really hard to speak.
Well, we'll come back to that in a moment because, of course, many people listening to this will not be native English speakers. But in this episode 14 of our LinkedIn Live presentations, in which we talk about writing, publishing, and daily life as a researcher and as an academic, we're going to talk about how you can avoid death by PowerPoint, how you can plan and deliver a fantastic research presentation. And Maria, you must have done thousands of research presentations over your illustrious career. Am I right?
Illustrious, of course. I've done some to a lot of different kinds of audiences, and that's basically the things that we want to talk to you about today. Is what the three main things you need to think about when planning the presentation is what purpose you want it to convey, what message, what you want people to take away from it, who are the people that are going to be watching you and interacting with you, and what kind of presentation do you want to give? Do you want to be boisterous and banter? Do you have to do a formal presentation with an outline and a suit and things like that? Or is it online? Is it face to face? How long is it going to take? All of those kinds of things.
Really, 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 really important. And of course, part of life as being a researcher, as being an academic, is giving presentations. It could be online, as we're doing now, or it could be face to face in a lecture theatre, in a classroom, talking to other researchers about what you're up to. And as Maria just said, before you do a talk, you've been given an invitation, let's say, you're about to give a presentation or even a lecture as a researcher, as an academic, first thing to do, and this helps a lot with nerves as well, by the way, to think about your purpose, your audience, and your style. Big difference, right, Maria, between a formal presentation at a conference, for example, and an informal presentation like this. I'd say this is pretty informal, right?
This is pretty informal. It's Friday lunchtime. We don't want to bore you. We want to give you information that you can actually withhold, but not have to digest too much. So what we want with these kinds of presentations is also to provide some sort of entertainment and give you bits of information. But in a conference, you want to convey a lot of information in a very short amount of time. And it's usually for people that are specialists in the subject area that you're presenting in as well. So you can go really into very minute details and they will understand it. Uh, you can use language that's much different. Your posture will be much different. And we will talk about this today.
In our presentation today? Absolutely. Well, this is a good start because let's imagine, come with us, if you will, on a journey. You've been invited to give a presentation What's the purpose? Is it going to be entertaining, or is it more likely an informative or persuasive presentation? And by persuasive, of course, we mean something like an interview or a presentation for a job or a grant application. Who's in the audience? Very, very important. And I don't know about Maria. I'm going to ask her in a moment. But before I agree to give any talk ever, my first question is always, who's going to be in the audience? Will they be native English speakers? Will it be a mix of people for whom English is not their first language? And will they be academics? Will they be researchers? Or will they be non-academics? Very important, because that helps you to pitch the presentation, right, Maria?
Yeah, of course. So you will always have to start with some background information. Uh, why are you doing the presentation to begin with? Why you, for instance? But that changes slightly with who you're presenting it to. So for a more general, broader audience, you'll need to spend more time in the background information to get people up to speed with the concepts that you're explaining. For a more specialized audience, you can go straight into very specifics and actually talk about processes and methodologies and molecular dynamics and things like that if you want, because they will be up to speed, they will understand you.
Absolutely. Very good point. Very good starting point. If you're listening to this on LinkedIn, don't forget you can put comments in the chat. You can put comments in the comments. Just comment on this LinkedIn feed. We'll see those popping up on our channel here, and we'll be able to answer them. So let's talk a little bit then about the kinds of situations you might find yourself in as a researcher, as an academic, as a young researcher giving a presentation. We've talked about what you need to have in mind before you agree to give the presentation. But here are some different settings, right, Maria, where you might end up giving a talk. Which of these do you find most nerve-wracking, by the way?
Uh, Actually, the most nerve-wracking for me were always department meetings. Not because in academic conferences, you have a fully defined story, hopefully. You have something that you've rehearsed, hopefully, and you know what you're going to say. In department meetings, you're talking about things that are free flowing, evolving, and you want people to give you feedback. So you may be confronted with something you have never thought about before. And that's probably a good thing because it will help you do your research grow and grow with updating yourself and even your style. You can have in department meetings, you can always have people comment on the style of your presentation and whether or not they understood something or something wasn't exactly clear.
It's a really good point. And Maria's key word from what Maria just said there really is rehearse, practice, practice, practice. Even though it seems like totally chaotic, a lot of the presentations that we do, in fact, they're deeply and expertly rehearsed over weeks in advance. You'll be attending potentially academic conferences, department meetings, maybe informal research presentations. I agree with Maria, absolutely. For me, the most nerve-wracking as a researcher was always department stuff, because you know everybody in the audience, you feel much more under pressure to do a good job. And you know, the advice I was given as an academic going to conferences, you're the expert. You won't be there if you're not the expert on the topic that you're going to be presenting. So it's always important to do the best possible job. Why is that? Well, people form impressions really, really quickly, especially if they've not met you before. It's the first presentation of yours that they're seeing, and those impressions are very, very slow to change. And you never know who's going to be in the audience, right, Maria? Could be somebody who could give you a job.
Well, that's one of the main advantages of actually attending conferences is that you get to network and speak to people that are interested in the work that you're doing presently uh, for a variety of reasons, and they may be the ones that will offer you a job later in the future, or they may be the ones that you will work with later in the future in future collaborations. Um, it's always good to know the people and kind of be aware, anticipate some of the questions that they will ask you.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that in a moment, like how to prepare for the question session, how to prepare for the talk itself. But here's a tip for you that we put together: how you can avoid boring people to death, how you can avoid death by PowerPoint, as we like to call it, how you can get your message across. So 3 key tips when planning a talk of any length, really, but it works particularly effectively for shorter talks, conference talks, right, Maria? You've got just 10, 12, 15 minutes to give your platform presentation. It's got to be planned, it's got to be well timed, and you've got to make sure that you get your message across effectively.
So you have to keep your message to the point. Don't digress and go into the very nice details that you know people are going to be fascinated in, but it's not what you want to tell them today. So be aware that probably you will have other opportunities to talk to the same people at other conferences or other meetings. Focus on what you want to say with that particular presentation. Get a list of 3 things you found and drill down on them. They are the most important thing that you want people to remember from your presentation. They are the most important thing that you want people to remember you've done and you've found. And those are the things that you want them to ask questions about.
This is important, really, really important. Of course, you need to make sure that you've unmuted yourself when you're giving an online presentation. That's important as well. But you've got 3 things that you really want people to learn about in the research that you've done. And you make a series of slides. We always recommend that you talk around 3s. One of the tricks in rhetoric, in the ancient art of rhetoric, is to do everything in sets of 3. Speak about things in sets of 3, reiterate things in sets of 3, list 3 things that you want people to remember from your presentation, from your research, and make a series of slides around those 3 key outcomes. Now, we haven't got a picture on this slide, but it's also really, really important to use pictures rather than lots of words in order to visualize your message. A picture is, after all, worth 1,000 words, right, Maria?
Yes, of course. And it's always good to select the pictures that you're going to show in a very in a very thorough manner. So you want, it may be that you're looking at a graph for ages and you know exactly what it means by now because you've looked at it for ages, but you have to explain it to the people that you're showing it to. So you need to put yourself in the position of someone who's never seen that before and try to figure out whether the first impact of an image is easily understood by people. So you need to make sure, for instance, that all your axes are labeled correctly, that you have a title, that you have a main takeaway message, and that you have context. So if you're comparing 2 time points, for instance, you need to clearly label what you're comparing it against.
You've got to understand what you're saying in your presentation. This is really, really important. Maria's talking about what we like to call confirmation bias or cognitive bias, where you've spent so much time looking at a particular figure or looking at a particular set of data. You know what the outcome is, you know what the message is, but is it really clear to your audience? So pictures, building a presentation around that set of 3 rule that we talked about a moment ago, and timing everything carefully. We'll talk about this in a moment in terms of tricks and tips that you can use to minimize your nervousness. But do you understand how to read the graph? Does the choice of visuals make sense given your data and your message? An appropriate amount of context, as Maria was talking about before. It depends on the audience. If it's a group of cardiologists and you're a cardiology researcher, well, then you don't need to explain the basics of heart circulation. But if it's a group of school kids, let's say, then you probably do, right, Maria? It's all about the context, how much information you're going to put into the.
It's also about how you draw your schematics or your graphs or whatever it is. For instance, it's really clear for cardiologists what a little shape like this and four chambers is, but not for school kids. They've never seen it before. You need to explain and you need to address and link it to them, make it pertinent to their own interests. And always in a slide, for instance, make it clear where people should focus first. There needs to be a coherent thread that links all the elements in your presentation together so that people know that there's a story to follow and that you are talking them through the story and using the visualizations to support your story, not be completely undermined by them.
There's a reason that these are called visual aids rather than just visuals, right? Like you're the presenter, you're going to be the center of attention in the presentation, in the lecture. The aids, the visual aids, are going to help you to get your message across. And we've put a few of these together here, how you can visualize and use your slides to get your message across effectively. And don't worry if you enjoy this presentation today, it's just a taster. We have entire workshops, entire webinars at sidetrain.com on this very topic, giving presentations in person and giving presentations online. Maria, how can I make sure my visualization matches my message?
So you need to make sure that all of the basics are covered. So be aware of misspellings, grammar mistakes, math errors, because those are going to annoy the people and they're going to focus on that specific error in your slide rather than what you're saying. So color must be used effectively. For instance, in this slide, you see that you have white space. You have space that breaks up the different topics that we're going to talk about. You have a visual slide that actually matches what we're talking about today. You have a color that's on brand with what you're saying. And the order of the content makes sense. We're talking about more general things first, and we're talking about more specialized things later. So the main message, the call to action is clear, and you have to optimize the materials for how you will deliver the content. For instance, it's not uncommon to see people that have recycled department meeting into academic conference presentations, but they forgot that their audience is not the same and they focused way too much on things that they shouldn't. And so they're not ready for when more specialized questions come in.
But you've got your three messages, you've got that structure to the presentation, you know what you're going to talk about, you know the result, and you know the three main elements of your presentation. Remember the rule of three that we use in all successful presentations. People remember things if they come at them in sets of three. That's an important thing to keep in mind. You've built your structure around that. You've got your slides nice and clear. They're visual aids. They're nice and colorful. You're using color in a good way. As Maria said, you've got the layout there. You've got the spacing correct. But your main message on each slide, does the visualization match my message? For example, on this one, the clear message of each slide. And this helps you. There's nothing better when giving a presentation, if you're a little bit nervous, than having slides that look nice and knowing what's going to come next. This is a bit of a surprise. I wasn't expecting this slide, Maria.
Why not? Why? What?
It's just a joke, you know. I've got to be ready for the next slide. This is important. How you deliver your presentation is extremely, extremely important. Some of this more relevant, of course, to face-to-face presentations. Some of it relevant to both face-to-face, like platform, conference, lecture theatre presentations, as well as online presentations. So, Maria, any top tips for non-verbal speaking style communication as you give your next presentation?
Always have the hero posture. So it's the the hero posture, the superhero posture. It kind of builds confidence. So you, if you're really nervous about something, go to the bathroom, look in the mirror, and make a superhero posture and say, from infinity to beyond, and that you're the best there ever was, because it will enable you to keep eye contact. One of the things that I always try to do whenever I'm giving presentations is to switch eye contact around in different places of the audience, find nice, friendly people, and talk to them for a bit, first to one person, then to another one, and face your audience. Don't face the slides if they're behind you. That's really important, because then people won't hear you. You won't see their expressions, and you won't be able to get feedback from what they're thinking about while you're giving your presentation.
I do that too, actually. If I'm giving a presentation in a lecture theatre, I focus on people who are obviously interested and are smiling back at me. You can do that. You can move between 4 or 5 people around the room. Face the audience, as Maria said. Make eye contact with individuals in the audience. Don't speak to the slides. That's a very common mistake that we see people making. They turn their back on the audience. Remember, you're the center of attention, not your slides. Your presentations are visual aids to help you with your presentation. Keep that upright posture. Don't fidget. Don't be stiff, though. You need to move naturally and match your voice and posture, your face and gestures to the message. I tend to use quite a lot of hand gestures when I'm doing online presentations. I think that keeps it a little bit more interesting. What do you think, Maria?
Everyone has a different style. I use much less hand gestures, but I think that it's a way that people are able to communicate. I really really enjoy having a difference in making the presentation feel more natural. It doesn't have to be extremely stiff all the time, and don't misinterpret, don't confuse formality with keeping things lively and interesting. So even when you're speaking, you have to vary your speaking style. If you say things like I just said, that's really very annoying. If you keep doing that over and over and over again, if you have words like, and if you keep your really your fidgets and your interjections and that, um, you can pause for emphasis, you can vary the tone, and more a lot. This is very very important, especially if you're speaking to audiences that are not native English speakers. You have to speak slowly and loudly so that people understand what you're saying and they have time to process the language before they process the content. It's really important that you don't talk off a script as well. Just, you can have a script, you can practice your script, but try to inject some life into your presentation.
Yeah, those are really, really good points. I used to know a guy who would memorize a script and then deliver his presentation as if it were live. And you can do that. That's a huge amount of work goes into that. But it's really important that you don't sound stiff, stuffy, like you're reading from a script. Be loud, be slow, make your, tone sound a bit enthusiastic. I think that's a really important point if you're doing online presentations in particular. I reckon that doing online presentations takes a little bit more energy than doing a face-to-face presentation, because some of that energy gets lost in the video screen. So you need to sound enthusiastic. And of course, again, you can kind of like, if you practice, you can train yourself, right? to not do many of those annoying verbal habits that lots of people have when they give presentations, right, Maria?
It's one of the very annoying things because it distracts you. It breaks cadence, it breaks rhythm. You don't really follow. There's no connecting thread because you're distracted with the ums and ands and the like. Um, so take all of the technical things and move them away from yourself. Get them all prepared before you even start. And then you will be able to more calmly and with uh, the enthusiasm that we know you will have for the research that you're doing, present it. So check all your microphones. Be sure that when you're in a conference, you upload your presentations in advance. Um, Present yourself, greet the audience. Um, if you can, ask them questions and check that everyone can hear or see you. It's one of the really bad things whenever you're muted and you keep talking and talking and talking and nobody can hear you. And ask people for their feedback. Don't be afraid to get interrupted, for instance. Sometimes that's better because it tells you something about the research that you're presenting and the presentation that you're giving, that people are interested in a point and that may not be entirely clear. So that will help you change for the next time.
These are, after all, at the end of the day, networking opportunities. The whole point of giving a talk in any context, in any setting, is indeed to network. And a little bit about what you'll actually say: clear and steady pace, engage with your audience, we've talked about as well, craft that strong opening. People often ask me, how can I overcome nerves? I get very nervous before I give a presentation. What's your top tip for dealing with nerves? Well, my top tip is practice your opening and have that first few sentences ready to go, because that really helps you to conquer presentation anxiety. Would you agree, Maria?
I think it's one of the best things. And usually you have a couple of filler slides to talk about information and the purpose and why you're doing this and what came before and what you're planning to achieve. And those are things that you know far in advance. So you can practice even before you practice the main message of your presentation.
Really important to have this in mind. Building your presentation around the rule of three. And so with that, we come to the rule of three. And this is really critical. I would always argue it's a bit of a newsreader technique, a bit of a religious preacher type technique. If you know what you're going to say it to the audience and then repeat it at the end. So a great tip for building presentations: you've got three messages, but at the beginning of the talk about what you're going to do. Say, in this talk, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. Then you deliver those three pieces of content that we talked about. And then at the end, recap. In this talk, we have covered X, Y, and Z.
And this is so that people more easily remember because they have been primed to listen to what you're saying from the very beginning. They're expecting what you told them. Then they go into the details of what you told them, and then they remember. They get reminded again at the very end of what you told them. And it's important to do this right before you give contact information, right before you ask for questions, because then people will associate those three things with you, with your face or your name, whatever it is that you want them to associate it with.
Learning outcomes, very important. Every presentation that you give has to have clear outcomes. People want to know why they're there. They want to know why they've tuned in to listen to this particular event. So in this presentation, we've been giving you tips to manage your presentations to help you deal with death by PowerPoint. We've talked about how you can set up your presentations with three elements. And then we've talked about a number of strategies for building in the content, including how you can do the delivery itself. Any last words, Maria?
I don't know if this is my style, but maybe I'll try this for next time. Or I don't know, maybe get a gimmick cat. We can try cat next time.
stroking a cat while you do the presentation.
Mr. Bond.
That would be great. If you'd like to learn more about the work that we do check out SciTrain.com. And if you've enjoyed this presentation, or indeed you're listening to it in the future and you're thinking, wouldn't it be fab to have an online presentation for my researchers? Do get in touch with us at SciTrain. Maria, thank you so much for your time today. We'll see you in the next episode of How Do You Solve a Problem with Maria?